The third category of stuff we're covering here is email clients and instant messengers. So, of course, email is really important. Most attacks start with email, although these days I've heard a lot of them are watering hole attacks to start with someone doing a web page. But one common way people get in is with a phishing email. Then the criminals actually use email to conspire. Send information back and forth, plan things. They actually steal data and email it in a way to get the data out of there. And the email can just be a target. Just stealing the email itself is quite a big deal, as we saw in the last election. So your emails are in fact very complicated, baffling objects. Let me open up some email here and show you. So here's this email about Internet Evidence Finder. So you can go here and you can view original. And this shows you what email really looks like. And so here's like the typical from and to and all that jazz. This is what actually it looks like. Delivered to me from here. This is all the message headers, all this garbage. Right up to here is stuff normal people never see. And this is tons of information about every email server it went through and what version it was running and what IP address it had and which server it went to next. And you can get lost in here. And I once had in this class, actually, one of my other classes, my students spent a while trying to help someone who was super paranoid, and they had been going through these email headers like astrology and convinced that someone was stalking her. But she found numbers and it was the same on everything. That proved it was the same guy. And I spent hours with her trying to convince her that that didn't mean that. But this is bafflingly complicated. Anyway, there are special tools just to try to figure out what all this junk means. And they're mostly written by people who want to stop spam, because there are some people that are very, very, very angry about spam. And they really want to find out who sent this spam. And they dig through this trying to figure out who did it with not a whole lot of success. But anyway, that's the headers. The headers is all that information about what servers it passed through. Then you've got, of course, the main person it goes to. CC is people who get a copy. BCC is people who get a copy, and the other people are not informed that those people got a copy. They're secret. And then the date and the subject. And that stuff right there is what's called the metadata. And in law enforcement terms, it's called the pen register. From the old days of telephone calls, without a search warrant, but with a much weaker legal structure, you can request a pen register, which means you cannot wiretap a phone and listen to the call, but you do get what's going to go on their phone bill, which is what number did they call, what time did they call, and how long was the conversation. And that's what you get here. You get this stuff, just the metadata, to, from, CC, subject, and date. And usually that's enough to get you in jail. I mean, that's why metadata is easy to seize, and it's often enough to prove that you're part of a conspiracy and all that jazz. But the body is the text itself, and the text, if it's binary stuff, and the attachments if it's binary, will be encoded with MIME format, which is just a way to take 8-bit data and code it in 7-bit ASCII. So it can be sent through email, because email is very old and was originally designed only to move ASCII text, not to move binary files. Anyway, so like I said, the headers are complex and difficult to interpret. There's a website here with instructions to try to read through this junk if you want, and there are tools like SamSpade that will try to automate it. In general, it's pretty maddening. And this stuff can be falsified, and it's very hard to detect when that happens. So anyway, another, of course, a big issue is almost nobody uses an email client anymore. Certainly at home, most people use online webmail, like Gmail, Yahoo Mail, AOL Mail, and the mail is never really on your device at all. You're just viewing it in the browser like a web page. It's not stored on your device. There's not logs or anything. So the only thing you can do, typically, is you might get lucky and find a little bit of junk in like the cache files for your browser, but you pretty much have to write a court order and subpoena this data from the provider, like Google or Yahoo or something, if you want to get that stuff. However, in corporate environments, people really do use email clients at work, because modern email clients, like heavy clients, thick clients like Outlook, are much more than email. They also have a calendar, an appointment, an instant messenger, and all sorts of stuff. And your corporation, if you're a Microsoft-based corporation, they will integrate all that stuff with all their corporate address book and corporate project planning and everything. So you really have to use the Microsoft product to integrate it into your corporate structure. And I know at Microsoft, everybody has to have 2 monitors, and the rule is 1 monitor must always be open to your email, because they use email to tell you, stop what you're doing, rush up to this emergency meeting, and you're supposed to always be paying attention to notice that. Anyway, so Outlook uses personal folder file format, If you're using Microsoft Exchange, which is Microsoft's email server, which is what most large companies do, then it stores this thing. You can have offline copies of mail stored in a offline storage table. Now, the reason people like this, use Outlook Web Access, because then it is like Gmail. You can access it from anywhere, and the email mostly stays on the server, but you can make local copies of it in offline storage. And if you're not using Exchange, then it uses another form of PFF called a personal storage table. And it stores it where it ought to in your profile in the app data folder. So you can get commercial forensic tools. Any of the huge suites like Encase and FTK will automatically find these files and automatically open them and just display you the emails. Your open source tools too. LibPFF is a Linux-based tool to unpack the PFF format. So if you want to run it on a Windows machine, you have to run it in Cygwin, which is a Unix emulator. Before there were virtual machines, there was Cygwin, which is an application that lets you run a Unix tool inside the application. It's a much simpler attempt to imitate Unix. Anyway, then there's Apple Mail, the built-in stuff for Macs. Stores all your stuff in essentially this analogous place, and you use your profile in Library Mail. If your email is just stored as a separate plain text message, very simple. You can just search for it with grep and strings. It's just sitting there. And Encase will find it all and just order it, so you can click on a tree-structured directory to see all the mails in the inbox and the outbox, just to make it handy. But you can just do it for command line Unix utilities too, since it's not encrypted or binary or anything. It's just sitting there. Microsoft Outlook for the Mac does pretty much the same thing. Here's the 2011 version. It stores it in documents, Microsoft user data in your profile in a proprietary database, and it's not binary, not much, but it does mix ASCII and Unicode. Now, this is Microsoft's decision. Microsoft product is an international company, and they support all so-called commercially relevant languages. Something like 150 languages are supported by Microsoft software. They will have a language pack for French and Arabic and Chinese and Japanese and everything. So they mostly want everything to be Unicode, so it's 16 bits per character, so it can be used for all those other languages. And that means you have to remember that when you're using grep and strings. You'll have to do everything twice with a switch saying search for this thing in ASCII and then search for it in Unicode. Anyway, there are tools like Aid for Mail and Email Commi are tools you can download that will do this for you. And then there's instant messaging. Boy, how many people use instant messaging anymore? I haven't used it in years. I don't know. Apparently people use it at corporations though. It used to be all the rage maybe 10 years ago. I think it's not that popular anymore. But anyway, so these are people, instant messaging has gotten pretty powerful. Originally it was two-way text only, then you had two-way voice. Now you got multi-channels, multiple group chats, voice, video conferencing, all sorts of good stuff, and connecting to telephones. So you can have people calling in and coming in from a computer altogether. So you have status, whether people are online or offline or away or such, which is available as another bit of information you might want to know. Anyway, IM clients typically update frequently. I know in practice, this is one of the more common ways to get into machines with Metasploit, because people that use instant messengers typically don't bother to update them, and so they're using like a 5-year out-of-date AOL Instant Messenger, and those things are completely hackable. They're full of mistakes. There used to be when I used to hang out in chat rooms, people would constantly hack their machine through the chat room client because they're just really sloppily written. And anyway, so that's an issue. So if you're going to test these things, get a clean VM, of course, and test your client to see if you have to figure it out yourself. Here's some common technologies. My typos are worse than usual today. All right. You'll find HTML is commonly used for the contents of the chat, the same as a web page. XML is another way. XML is the larger category of languages of which HTML is a subset. It's just a way to write things in plain text where you have an opening tag and a closing tag to record what kind of data is stored. Windows Messenger stores its logs as XML, and AOL stores them as HTML. And then there's SQLite, we talked about before, a very simple database, and SOAP, another way to store things looking kind of like XML. So the three kinds to talk about here are Skype, Facebook, and AIM. Skype originally came from the people that made one of the BitTorrent products in Estonia, and was used by sort of underground people that wanted to do illegal things. So it was heavily encrypted, and the head of the NSA offered a $1 million reward to anybody that could hack into it. And someone reverse engineered it and found out that it was using AES-256, which they can't hack into. They didn't do something stupid like invent their own cryptography. But then Microsoft bought Skype, and they immediately took that out. and made it so anybody can easily get at the data. And so now, by default, it retains the logs forever, which can't, I guess, be forever, but anyway, up to some kind of limit. And SQLite 3, and so those logs are stored in your profile. There were quite a few scandals about Skype. When Skype was used in China at first, they promised all their users that no logs would be kept. Then they went and found logs stored on the government servers available to everyone, the logs there, and in front of Skype they said, oh, you know, the government told us they were not going to let people see that. Anyway, that was for the text messages through Skype. The voice calls were heavily encrypted, and as far as I know, not hackable for a while, but now that Microsoft has it, I think it's all available to people that have a search warrant. So it stores your voicemails as audio files down here in this, the new voicemails here, and they're in a proprietary format, so you can't just play them in a player, but you can just take it on a machine, install Skype, bring them in, and play them there. So you can listen to the voice calls that have been saved. The preferences are saved there, and it's got contact names, chat histories, their avatar paths, so you can see what image they project, which may often be a photograph of the person, their dialed numbers. You know, it's really a wealth of information. People that do use this thing, you're leaving a long log of everything, just like if you make long-distance phone calls, the phone company's recording what you've been doing, although usually not retaining the content, but Skype is retaining the content too, to some extent. Anyway, the SQLite browsers, and there are a lot of Skype-specific tools you can download just to get the data out of Skype, so that's good, clean fun. Then there's Facebook chat, which I didn't even know about. I don't use Facebook. But apparently, if you're on Facebook, you can chat with your friends inside Facebook. I know you can do it in Gmail. And this is pretty hard for the forensic investigator because you don't install anything locally. You just view Facebook in your browser and chat inside there. So nothing's stored locally, not even logs. It's all inside Facebook servers. So the only way to get it is to go submit legal documents to Facebook and get them to give it to you. There's no way to get it by analyzing the hard drive. If you're lucky, you might find something in RAM, because while you're chatting, of course, their stuff is going in RAM. You might find it in places where RAM is copied to, like page files and hibernation files. Unallocated space, if you're lucky, you might find fragments of some old page file or something, and maybe in the browser cache. All these are not too likely to work, and if you do get them, they're not going to have owners, timestamps, or file names. You're probably not going to get the whole file. So this is pretty last-ditch stuff. And if you do any of the big suites like FTK or Encase, it'll have all the files and everything, the emails it can find, and then it will have unallocated space that you can search for strings and fragments, and you might find something there, but the problem is if you do find it there, you have no record of who put it there or when it got there. So it's usually useless. But in some rare cases, you might find something valuable there, like if you want to find a password or something. But stuff you find in that kind of fragmentary space is typically not easily attributable to any particular incident. Internet Evidence Finder can also carve up a memory image and look for Facebook items in RAM. So one good thing about chat and email is you might be able to get a fragment that actually contains the name of who said it, and maybe the date of who said it, as part of its structure. And then you'd have a record, even though the computer's file system did not put it in a file and give it a timestamp, it might have an internal timestamp, which could be helpful. Anyway, AOL Instant Messenger is another one. It doesn't store any logs by default, however. You can turn on logging, but I don't know why people would do that if they're doing bad things on here, but you might get lucky. It stores these saved chats in HTML format, and you can view them in any log. They're just HTML. There's a SQLite database for preferences. And I think we're down to the last batch of iClickers. All right. So, what mail system leaves the least evidence on the workstation? Quit at 30. All right, and Gmail leaves very little because you just view it in the browser. These are all installed locally and they have logs and history and all that jazz. This is going to leave no more trace than just browsing a website, not much. All right, where's the Microsoft product? Some companies like Twitter and Apple make a big deal out of protecting you from the government. Microsoft has never made any pretense of doing that, like AT&T. They roll over like a puppy when the government comes asking for things. All right, so that's the Skype. All right, now owned by Microsoft. Anyway, so which item uses no locally installed software? The EFF has a privacy grading card for companies that shows you how much they protect your privacy. And I know Twitter scores pretty high and a lot of companies score pretty low. So you can, if you care, see how much they demand due process from the government. But a lot of them, their main customers to government, so they're really not much motivated to push back on government demands. All right, and that's Facebook. Has nothing stored locally. All right, let me stop the recording, if indeed I remembered to start it. I think I did. This is chapter 14. And I'll see who won.